So far away, Lucas, I'm wearing my business jacket, and do you know what that means?
Well, that means you're both ready to do business and to apparently fight because you've got a Dragon Ball shirt on too.
Exactly, yes. So, I'm dressed for business, but not quite. That's because this is another episode of How Not to Do Business, the infrequently updated series we have here on Fact Fiend, where I detail my misadventures of trying to traverse the business world and my various interactions with its villains. And I don't think we're ever going to be able to make another How Not to Do Business, Lucas, because today's episode is about the biggest villain of all, Landlords. And in all my years of doing this, I've learned one thing about doing business on YouTube, and that is working with sponsors. So it's over to you now, Lucas, for a word from today's sponsor, Aura.
Today's video is sponsored by Aura. As somebody that makes content online, you'd think it'd be pretty obvious that I have to be very careful when it comes to my online security. What may be less obvious is that all of us are vulnerable to security breaches, and that threat isn't to be taken lightly. I've had family members fall prey to it before, and it can be very hard to get your money back, if at all. Those of you in America may know that over 2.9 billion records were recently stolen from national public data, which includes information like your name, address, date of birth, and even social security numbers. To make things worse, the hacker group reportedly released this information online for others to potentially access. You should be able to feel safe with your own private information, but right now you may be more at risk than ever, which is where Aura comes in. Aura provides a selection of features to help keep you safe online. You'll get alerts if Aura finds your phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They'll also let you know quickly if anyone is trying to use that information to access anything critical, such as your bank or credit accounts. Not only that, but if the worst case scenario does occur, then Aura offers up to $5 million in identity theft insurance just in case. You can go to aura.com/factfiend to try Aura free for 14 days. This will give Aura enough time to find out what, if any, of your personal data is already out there. It's unlikely that these hackers will see any repercussions for this data leak, but now is a better time than ever to make sure that your information is safe. Don't leave yourself potentially vulnerable. Try out Aura free for 14 days by going to aura.com/factfiend.
And for anyone unfamiliar with how we do things here on Fact Fiend when it comes to sponsors, I will of course be splitting the money made today with my co-host Lucas.
Hello there.
And I'll be donating a portion of my own proceeds to charity, specifically for today, the charity Shelter, who among other services offer advice to people dealing with problem landlords.
And of course, I will also be providing a split of my money to a charity of my choosing, which is Clare House Children's Hospice, and that is just a local children's hospice over on Merseyside.
And there we go. So yeah, thank you to today's sponsor, and thank you to everyone for tuning in today. But Lucas, let's get to it. So this journey has been 8 months in the making, and anybody who follows me on social media knows that I have been dealing with a problem landlord for the entirety of 2024.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Dickovich. All I got is this 20 for the rest of the week.
Sorry doesn't pay the rent. And don't try to sneak past me. I have ears like a cat and eyes like a rodent.
Yeah, and I just find it very funny that a lot of the time people want updates like the next day, as if it's all going to come together so quickly. They're drawn out experiences, everybody.
Yes, this has been 8 months in the making, and some of the details of the story I'm about to tell will be truncated and some details will be changed so that I don't get sued if my landlord decides to landlord and be an arsehole and want more money out of me. And this story begins at the start of 2024 when I received a message from my landlord that I think anyone who's rented will be familiar with. And that message read something to the tune of, "Hi Karl, just a friendly reminder that your rent will be going up this year." Because there's nothing friendlier than like, hey, you owe us more money. Right?
Please, for the exact same location and experience, give us more money.
If anything, it's like we're going to charge you more money for a worse experience because the flat is by definition going to be a little bit worse because I've been living in it.
Yeah, there's just wear and tear, obviously, and I know as a friend of yours, just generally offline having conversations with you, that there are problems that arise in that flat that they just have not dealt with, or at least didn't deal with while you were living there.
Yeah, there were numerous problems that we'll get to that were just never fixed. And a rent increase is to be expected. I'd had several while living there. So for context, I'd lived in the flat we're talking about for 4 years at this point. And each year it'd been raised by like £10, £15, which is like, okay, fine. I'm not going to go through the rigmarole of moving again over £10, right?
No, that's the kind of little bit of expectation of just, yeah, inflation is a thing, give us a little bit more money every year. Just a couple of % extra.
And that's normally how landlords operate, right? They twist the thumb screws a little bit more. They raise the temperatures a little bit more, hoping that you won't notice. But my landlord decided, well, that's stupid. I'm just going to charge Karl £200 more.
That must be our new landlord, Mr. Stingely.
Where is the rent? I must have the rent.
Yeah, it's the obvious frog in boiling water metaphor, isn't it? Of slowly turn the heat up and just the frog will never notice. But all of a sudden your landlord just cranked the heat setting to high.
Because you know what? This guy's got some money. And that should be in our pockets. And I'll clarify now, I'm going to be using the terms landlord and landlady interchangeably throughout this video. That's because my property was owned by a husband and wife landlord-landlady team.
Ah, yes.
So if anyone's curious, like what you said, landlord then and then landlady next, it's because I was dealing with both of them simultaneously.
Truly the toxic couple.
the toxic power couple of Sheffield, yes. So, and I got that message, and this is one of those memories where I know it's evidence that I'm going insane, but I swear to God, Lucas, when I was looking at my phone and I got that message, I was like in the bathroom taking a piss, and I looked up, and I swear to God, I saw my reflection in the mirror just go, no, don't do it. But here's the thing. You never tell a landlord that you're planning on moving out. That's just a bad time, right? And again, for context, I have lived in many different places across the city of Sheffield. And Lucas, you can confirm I have lived in many different locations as long as you've known me, yes?
Yeah, over the, dozen years that we've known each other, I can say that I've known Karl to live in a variety of locations across Sheffield.
Let's put it diplomatically, like I've lived in some shitholes. And
yeah.
I have dealt with a lot of landlords, and nearly all of them have been pricks. The one exception being our mutual friend, Chris. And Chris was the guy who let me sleep on his sofa, which allowed me to start Fiend. So the reason I am now recording this from a house that I own can be traced directly back to our good friend Chris. So let's just round of applause for Chris, the one good landlord. So let's be fair to landlords. I've met one who's not an arsehole.
And that's the thing, they weren't officially a landlord, they just owned their own house, so were allowed to let you, let out a room, shall we say, either just give us a little bit of money on the side and you can crash on my sofa for a bit.
Yeah, it's like, bull me a couple £100 and you can stay on my sofa, and that's where the first Fiend videos were recorded. And the security that afforded allowed me to start Fiend, which resulted in the business that I now own. And the security that afforded me allowed me to start Fiend.
It does say a lot that the only person that you can call a good landlord is a friend that let you sleep on their sofa for a bit.
And to be clear, that's not a joke. Like, here's a photo that I like to share of. This is the first thing I ever bought with the money that Fiend made when the videos first went viral. And that's a duvet on the sofa bed that was in his front room. And the reason I bought a duvet is because during the years when I was couch surfing as a freelance writer and living off $100 a week, all I had to my name was a duvet and a laptop. And Lucas, do you remember those days? Do you remember just laptop Karl? That's what I had.
And the thing is, the most I remember about landlord...
Not landlord,
say
Karl.
Landlord Karl.
Don't you dare call me a landlord. That's a dirty word in this house.
Laptop Karl is just every time we would go on a night out, it doesn't matter whether it was we were pre-drinking at yours or we were pre-drinking somewhere else, Laptop Karl would always be there with his laptop, like, oh, let me just finish up this article I'm writing before we start drinking so that I can earn some money to go out for tonight.
Because it's the only thing I owned of any value, and it was the only way I had to earn money. Anyway, that's just a little bit of scene setting. I've dealt with a lot of landlords, and in my experience, you don't tell a landlord that you're planning on moving out, because that's just going to make the landlord annoyed. They're like wild animals. Like, don't annoy them. So what I did is I was very tactful, and I told my landlord, oh, okay, thank you for letting me know. Can you reach back out when the time comes to renegotiate my contract, and we'll discuss it then? Because I signed, a rental agreement that each and every year I'd renegotiate the contract. And as mentioned previously, it'd been like £10, £15. I was happy to re-sign that. I'm like, sure, I don't want to move.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive pain moving. Even if it is just moving out of a one-bed apartment, it's still a massive deal.
Yeah, and I've done it a lot. So I knew that I could if I needed to, but for the sake of 15 quid, it wasn't worth looking for a new place. But when it comes to like, okay, it's another £200, now the justification is there to maybe look at moving somewhere else. And that's what kicked me in the arse and got me to look at buying the place that I'm in now. But what I did is I was diplomatic. And I didn't think any more about this until a couple of months later, in April, when I got a message from my landlord. And it was on a Friday. And the reason I know it was on a Friday is because what happens in the story next. And I got a message from my landlord that read something to the effect of, "Hi Karl, as per our conversation earlier, 3 months prior, we're going to be raising your rent. As we didn't hear from you and the date for the renegotiations has since passed, we're to take it that you've agreed to the £900, like the increase to £900. Please send your month's rent to the usual place as soon as possible."
And had it gone past the date of renegotiation?
It has, and this is where I hold my hands up and say, this was my bad. And at this point, I was happy to be like, okay, chalk it up to experience. I made a mistake, so I sent back a message of like, oh, my bad, didn't realise. This will be my last month living in the property. Please let me know like the final day you'd want me here. I will start the process of moving out now. And didn't hear anything back. And over that weekend, I just started packing away all of my stuff and started calling friends and family and stuff to arrange, the classic, the call that you give people of, hey, remember when I helped you move? It's time to call in the favour.
Yeah, and originally your plan was going to just see if you can sofa surf for a little bit and put your things in storage, right?
Yeah, as I've done many, many times before. And I called up a good friend of mine who I'd helped move like last year. And when I called him up, I went, mate, I've got to ask you a favour. He's like, for fuck's sake, do I need to get a van? I went, you'll need to get a van. And I didn't hear anything from my landlord until Monday morning. And I'm just going to say, if anyone out there wants to catch me in a good mood, you want to work with me in the future, don't message me first thing Monday morning. And the reason, again, I know the message came in at first thing Monday morning is because it was a message from my landlord. And the message read something to the effect of, "Hi Karl, sorry to hear that you won't be staying on. As you are aware, under Housing Association Act, who cares, you have to give us at least 4 weeks notice, and you unfortunately provided notice after working hours had closed on a Friday. So we will unfortunately have to post-date your leaving due, so you owe us like for the 3 days extra you're going to have to stay." And that's when I went from being chalked up to experience, my bad, to, okay, I'm mad now. Because that, and I remember I told you guys about this, and all of you were like, okay, what are you going to do?
Yeah, of just the audacity to say, you decided to message us after closing hours on Friday.
Because they'd sent me a message at 5 o'clock, letting me know, and that's what made me realise, they know. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, of course they do. And just the idea that, hey, you've given us rent, just completely fine, no late payments, nothing like that. If anything, like sometimes early payments, and just for entire 4 years, and they're going to try and screw you on 3 days' notice when they purposefully sent the message on Friday at 5.
And again, like, someone out there might be tempted to say, well, that was your fault, and that's why I held my hands up to it, was my mistake. But here's the thing that you're able to do in the world of business. You are able to employ something known as discretion. And it was entirely within my landlord's discretion to be like, okay, that is technically the deal of like you have to give 4 weeks notice, but we can, at our discretion, we can ignore that and just agree to let you move out on this particular day so that no extra funds and monies have to be exchanged. But we're talking about a landlord here, and they saw the opportunity to get an extra £95 out of me, and they goddamn took it. And that was when I decided, okay, I'm just now going to, if this is the way the landlord wants to play, if they want to play it by the book, if they want to start quoting statutes and housing association rules at me, and they want to start referring to my renters agreement, that's the game we're going to play.
And I will note as well, up until this point, you've obviously had little bits here and there where they've raised prices and stuff over the years, but it was a relatively amicable relationship between the two of you, and then all of a sudden you got a message, no, according to these laws, you owe us an extra 3 days' money.
And that's what just frustrated me, especially given that prior to this situation, I had always paid my rent a year up front. Because that was the only way back in the day when I was a freelance writer without any capital or ability to prove my earnings. Like, I used to literally, write articles for $5 a pop. The only way I could secure housing without a guarantor, which I couldn't get, was to put money up front. So that's just the habit I got into.
Yeah, fair.
Because I was a freelancer, and it's like, well, you need a guarantor. It's like, well, I haven't got one. So, okay, you need, this much rent up front, which is why I ended up living in some real bad places, Lucas, because that's all I could afford. But then, sometimes I was doing a little bit better. Other times I had a successful YouTube channel. Other times I had a business.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Just, what's a better guarantor than paying all of the money that they want for a year up front? Is it, well, you don't need a guarantor now, do you? Because I've already given you the money. You don't need a guarantee that it'll come further down the line.
I would like to point out at this point that I got no explanation or reasoning for why my rent was going up £200. All my landlady said was just, costs are going up and the service charge to the building has risen. And for anyone unfamiliar, a service charge is a fee that you will generally pay if you live in a flat or other communal dwelling. They pull together and used to pay for things like landscaping or maintenance of the elevator. And
guess what? As somebody that doesn't own the flat, Karl, that's not your problem.
It's not, but I can understand and empathise with, hey, if that cost had risen by a significant amount and you can no longer afford to pay, say, your mortgage, maybe your rent that you charge on that flat has to go up. But I didn't know how much it went up by. But I do know now. And you know what? I was going to save this to the end, Lucas, because I had a bit, but I realised I didn't have, the props for it. So do you want to know how much? Because I ended up, while I was living there, becoming quite good mates with the building manager. And
yeah, so Karl just did some investigative journalism on his own.
I really did. I went full secret agent mode for this story. And obviously, the guy couldn't tell me for sure. He's like, I can't tell you exactly what the service charge was for that flat. That's private information. However, I can do some maths if you know the square footage of the apartment, and I can use these numbers for what the building charges per square foot for a service charge. Mm-hmm. I can also show you the historical numbers for, the same thing. And he calculated that the service charge for that flat had risen by £10. So I want people at home.
Per month, per year?
Per month. So I'd like everyone to keep in mind as we go through this story that it all started because my landlord didn't want to pay £10.
No, they wanted you to pay the £10, but also an extra £150+ a month on top of that.
So, and that's the thing, if they'd raised the rent by a tenner, I'd probably still be living in that apartment. So I have to thank them because now I own my own place. It kicked me up the arse and got me to buy this place, but still, it's really frustrating. So I began, I'm just going to, if they want to play it by the book, hey, where's that book? I was taking a break on Fact Fiend at the time for personal reasons. I've got all the time in the world, baby. Where's that book? So I read through my tenancy agreement, I read up on all the housing statutes, I read up on all the stuff that, concerned renting in, the kind of abode that I was, in, and went, okay, now I know.
A person should not have to have an advanced law degree to avoid being taken advantage of by a multi-billion-dollar company. And you should be upfront about what you're doing.
And then it began, Lucas. About a week or so, I didn't hear anything. Then I realised, hang on a second, my landlord told me they want to sell this place. They're probably at some point going to want to come in and take some photos. And after about a week or so, the messages started, Lucas. And do you want to hazard a guess at what the messages read like?
I'm presuming it was something along the lines of either, can you tidy up the flat to make sure that it's all super presentable, and B, also maybe even, can you show some people round to do essentially viewings for us?
Yes, so I started to get a very specific flavour of message from my landlord, and it was, hi Karl, just checking in. We'd like to see if we're able to come to the flat at some point to take some photos. To which I responded, only contact me through email as per our tenancy agreement. And they sent another message after that of hi Karl, hopefully there's no hard feelings. Are we able to come to the flat to take some photos? To which I responded, please communicate through email as per the tenancy agreement. And then I got an email, about half an hour later, which I didn't respond to until Monday the following week. Because of course, to which I responded,
business hours.
To which I responded, as per the tenancy agreement, I don't give you permission to enter the property. And here's a pro tip. If you rent somewhere and your landlord asks to come into the property, you are well within your rights to say, nah. No is a complete sentence, and landlords, they hate that word, which is why it's so fun to say.
And we are obviously talking UK law here. We don't know anything specific outside of the UK because that's where we've both lived and rented. But also, they do have to ask your permission and give 24 hours notice, even if you do say yes.
Yes. So I didn't say yes, Lucas. I said no. And this continued for back and forth for a little bit until they try to play hardball. And they're like, well, Karl, legally we were within our rights to enter the property at any time we wish. To which I responded, according to the statute you are quoting, you have to have a good reason for entering the property, such as an emergency. As there is no such emergency, I do not give you permission to enter the property, and any attempt to do so will be treated as trespassing. To which I received a very curt email saying, I don't know why you're trying to make this difficult. Oh, I don't know why? You don't know why?
I don't know why we're in a fight that I started. What the hell, Karl?
And the mess just stopped until about a week before my move-out date, which is when they started asking another question. And Lucas, would you like to hazard a guess at the question they were asking me a week before my move-out date?
I'm going to presume it's something along the lines of, when are you getting out of our apartment?
Yes. And they worded it in a way that really pissed me off. And it was, hi, Karl. Just checking, when is it you plan on moving out? If it's easier for you and you'd like to move out a few days earlier, that's okay.
And bear in mind, they've already charged you for those extra few days.
And Lucas, you are 100% correct, because when I got that message, that was like a red rag to a bull. And I was like, how, are you kidding me? After you've charged me for 3 extra days of staying in this spot, I'm staying for the full 3 days. So I just said that I will be staying in the property until the final day of move out, 12 p.m, as per the tenancy agreement. If you would like me to move out earlier, if you can offer me some compensation for doing that, I'd be interested. To which they responded, we don't see why we'd offer you compensation for moving out earlier.
However, we do see why we would charge you an extra few days.
It's such a landlord move, right? So I said, well, okay, I will be moving out as per the tenancy agreement on this date at 12 p.m. Who will be coming to collect the keys? And this is like one of the things I'm most proud of, because it's very petty, but I think anyone listening to the story so far probably understands why I was like in the mood to be petty.
And that's the thing, right? Is this, a lot of it may sound like a war of pettiness, but the important thing to remember is that they started the pettiness with the whole, you contacted us after Friday at 5 p.m.
Yeah, and at any point, like, this could have been like avoided by my landlord just realising it'd be easier to just show any amount of contrition.
And I just don't think that they were prepared to deal with someone who was willing to stoop down to their level.
They weren't prepared to deal with someone who, at the time, was on hiatus and had unlimited free time.
Cool! I'm unemployed! Come on, honey, let's go frolic with the other unemployed people!
Who is also very, very petty. So, I asked them, hey, who's coming to collect the keys? And normally, I'm not sure how it is in America, but in the UK, at least every move-out day I've ever done, it's normally like, okay, on the last day, just post your keys through the letterbox, right? Is that not anything for you?
I've had it at times with, like, when it was university accommodation and stuff of, can you drop it back off at the office and things like that. But, yeah, generally, I've either had to drop it off at an office or someone's come and met me at the property and taken the keys.
And coming to collect the keys in person is something that can happen, but it doesn't always have to be that way. But I read through my tenancy contract and it said that I had to hand my keys to either the landlord or a designated representative. So I asked them, again, who will be meeting me at 12 p.m. on the move-out date? Will it be yourself or a designated representative? To which they responded, you can leave the keys in the apartment, it's okay. No, as per the tenancy agreement, I want to meet a designated representative or yourself. Who were you sending? And then at about 10 p.m. the day before I moved out, at this point as well, I'd moved out. The apartment was empty. But I was being petty. And at about 10 p.m. before my move out date, I just got a message, my husband will meet you in the morning.
And that's the thing, right, is if they want to play by the ball to the letter, then yeah, they literally have to have somebody there. They can't just tell you to leave the keys in the apartment.
No. And Lucas, here's the part of the story I'm most proud of, because it's just, I don't think I'll ever forget this memory, because it's possibly one of the funniest things I've ever done, and no one saw it. Well, at least now people will hear about it. And smash cut to about 10 to 12 the next day. I'm stood outside the apartment, just just there with my keys, waiting. And then I get a phone call from an unknown number. I look at it and I go, that's probably the landlord's husband. Keep in mind, this is a key fob entry only building. And again, a couple more phone calls, ignore them. I only wanted to communicate through email. That's not an email, right? Somewhere.
No, it's not, no.
At about 10 past 12, I see the landlord's husband, comes upstairs, he's huffing and he's puffing. So, have you got the keys? Yeah. Why didn't you answer your phone? Oh, it was an unknown number. I asked your wife that I wanted to communicate through emails. Did you email me? No. Have you got the keys? Yeah. Have you got a receipt? What? Well, I'm not going to give you the keys until you give me a receipt. What do you mean I've got to give you a receipt? It's like, as per the tenancy agreement. And as soon as I said that, you saw his eyes fucking wrong. He's like, okay. And he's like, he pulls out a piece of paper. Have you got a pen? No. And he's seen dig through, and clear as well. He'd come from work because he's dressed in his work outfit. He's got his work satchel. Starts digging through his work bag for a pen. Hastily writes me a receipt and hands it to me. And I give him the keys. And then he goes back to the elevator, and I just follow him to the elevator. Get in the elevator with him, and he presses for the ground floor. I just press for the next floor down. So I'm saying goodbye to some people who live in the building. I wasn't. Just he pulls down at the next floor and say out to your wife for me and just get out. And then just walk out. And I see his car going out out the parking place. And I just wave at him as he goes past. And then I went back to my apartment and I got that receipt and I put it on my table and I cracked open a beer and I used that shit as a beer mat.
Hell, goddamn, yeah.
But then, later that evening, Lucas, I got a message. And you know where this is going, right? Because you were following this in the group chat.
I do, but apparently Oryx wants to tell the story because he just can't stop barking in the background.
Woof, 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 woof. And the message I got was quite curt. No thanking me for, meeting a husband to give the keys. The landlady was saying, hi, Karl, we're in the property, and there's some furniture left behind. And this is another moment where I hold my hands up. I'd moved into the property 4 years prior, and I bought a bunch of stuff from a charity shop. And all the furniture I'd moved to my new place didn't match this furniture I'd left behind. I genuinely didn't realise it was mine. And I'd already gotten rid of a bunch of furniture, including stuff that the landlord didn't want. Like, she'd left behind, a bunch of tables and chairs that I got rid of.
When you initially moved in, yes, yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 years into the tenancy, I asked her, well, I want to get a new table and chairs. Can I get rid of yours? And it's like, okay, we can't pay it. It's like, fine, I'll get rid of them and I'll buy new chairs. And I think I left behind half of those chairs for the flat. So when I got the message of, hey, there's some furniture left behind, I was like, okay, I've had my fun. So I just sent a message of, hey, there is a waste removal service in the building. It's what I use to get rid of the furniture you asked me to get rid of a few years ago. They charge £29. You can go speak to the building manager. His name's this. You can go talk to him. He's downstairs. It'll cost you 20 quid, my bad. And I just assume, oh, sure, this is... As I said, I had my fun. But Lucas, my landlord did not respond well to this. How did they respond?
I believe they responded by just putting all of the furniture outside the flat, right? And saying, I know you don't have access to the property, but your furniture's just outside of it. Go pick it up now.
Yeah. You're missing a step, because what they did is they said, according to the tenancy agreement, it is the tenant's responsibility to remove any furniture from the property when they vacate the premises. To which I responded, I know my beer, went, that's not true. And I went and got the relevant statutes that they were quoting, because the tenancy agreement said one thing, but the statutes that refer to tenancy in the UK said otherwise. And they say that anything that's left in the property after a tenant vacates is the landlord's responsibility. The landlord can, of course, like try and locate the tenant, but if the tenant doesn't want the stuff, it's the landlord's responsibility to dispose of. So I sent that relevant paragraph to my landlord and said, actually, no, it's not my responsibility, it's yours. As said, the building will get rid of it for a fee. Just take that out of my deposit. It's not my responsibility. Cheers. To which they sent, as you mentioned, Lucas, another curt message saying, we're leaving the furniture outside of the property. If it's not gone by the morning, there will be an issue.
And that's the thing, is you're following the letter of the law, not the tenancy agreement. And yeah, they can call you a dick and not be happy about it. But at the end of the day, legally, it is not your responsibility to deal with that furniture.
It wasn't. And again, it's another of those situations where if they'd shown any amount of contrition and they'd just said, oh, like, you know, when I said, because it genuinely was a mistake on my part, if they'd responded, well, okay, can you come and collect it? I would have been like, sure, yeah. But it's like, no, you have to get rid of this right now. It is your responsibility. I'm like, no, it's not. It's yours. You deal with it. I'm in my new place. You sort it out. And I remembered when I was sat there in that beer, well, I'm not too drunk, and I could go for a jog. And I normally go for a jog, like, you know, near my old apartment. So for old time's sake, I might go for a jog there. And while I went for a jog there, I bumped into the security guard to the property. And, you know, he's another guy that I'd met over, like, you know, the 4 years I'd lived there and knew quite well. And I just thought, again, I'm going to be a little bit petty here. So I went to the security guard and, hi, I'm not sure if you're the person I have to talk to about this, but the people up on have left some furniture outside of their house, and my missus was trying to go put the bins out early and nearly tripped over it. Like, it's probably a safety issue. Can you do something about that? He went, yeah, I saw that earlier. Leave it with me, I'll sort it. And then I went, just jogged home. And I did find out through the building manager they did get yelled at by the security guard. And they had to move it. Oh. And I probably thought nothing of it until about a month later when I realised, hang on a second, they owe me money. I need my deposit back.
Of course, yeah. That's, you know, normally how things go, right? Is you've put a deposit down, you know, they will take what they deem necessary out of the deposit and pay you back.
Well, that's the problem. Like, I always assumed, like, you know, that a deposit was an amount of money is placed into, you know, the care of a third party in good faith that could be used to pay for any repairs or like cleaning necessary beyond reasonable wear and tear upon a tenant moving out of a property. I didn't realise that landlord just saw it as another month's rent.
And that's the whole thing that people always share online, right, is the ridiculous amount of money that people claim to need for cleaning and repairs and things like that when people move out.
And presumably the majority of people watching this have a nightmare story about a landlord being an arse when it comes to the return of their deposit. I have many. I remember my first ever student flat. We got charged £90 because there was a single p left in the freezer. And that's £90 for all 5 people who live there. And I remember, because I wanted to contest that, but one of the people who lived in the property with us needed that money back. And you all had to agree, or none of you agreed. So we all had to agree to eat that £90 cost because they needed their deposit money back to pay the deposit on their next place. And I vowed on that day that I would never do that because I was so mad that I had to pay that fee. And every property I've lived in since, I have fought my deposit tooth and nail just out of just sheer petty spite. And I remember once it was, oh, a landlord says, well, you left some stuff in the bin and they had to dispose of it. And I was like, okay, send me the picture of the stuff you had to dispose of. And they sent a picture of the bin bag we'd put into the bin. And they were like, oh, you left some stuff in the cupboards. And it was cleaning supplies we'd left behind. And that charge got thrown out and I got my deposit back. And I knew that this landlord was going to be the same because all landlords do it.
Yeah, and I remember the last property I moved out of, we'd cleaned to a reasonable degree, and they decided to tell us, like, no, you know, even though you literally got friends and family to come in to like wipe every surface clean, make sure everything was repainted, resurfaced, everything, no, we're going to charge you £500 for cleaning fees. And we decided, no. Do you remember what you made us move into? Because they were planning on moving us into a flat that was ready but then it failed the boiler safety test. And they moved us into the flat that wasn't ready in the same building, which had black mold everywhere, just generally was not cleaned in any way, shape, or form. They just moved us into, like, this dusty, moldy, dirty shithole and said, this is the only place we have, you need to move in here. And then decided, when we moved out, no, even though you've cleaned it and we sent you into somewhere with literal mold on the walls, it's not good enough.
Yep, and I'm sure, again, majority of people watching this have a similar story about a landlord, because they all do this. They are all just after your money, and I knew it'd be the same way with my landlord. So as soon as the 28 days, I knew they'd wait until the last day as well. That's why I didn't even bother reaching out to ask about my deposits. I knew they would wait until the last possible second to respond about it. So after a month had passed, I reached out and went, okay, can I get my deposit back? And right away, they said, okay, well, we've done some preliminary costing, and we think that it's about £500 worth of damage and cleaning that's been done to the flat. If you would agree to that, we can release the rest of the deposit right now. Otherwise, it'll have to go to arbitration. And I just sent straight back, if I take it to arbitration.
Just rubbing your hands together like, let's arbitrate, baby.
It's not even that, it's more just, I as soon as I saw they went 500 quid in right away, I went, I'm not getting any of this. Like, they want it all, because for anyone curious, the amount was about £900 my deposit. It was a month and a half's rent, roughly, when I first moved in. I think when I first moved in, my rent was like 625, and it was like, it's like 900 quid deposit. They wanted half of it, and I was like, just go straight to arbitration. And when it went to arbitration, it took another month for it to go through that, of course, because the process takes an absolute age, because as soon as it went to arbitration, there's a period of arbitration where, well, you and the landlord can work out your differences before we need to step in. And it's like, they didn't even answer any of my messages.
And that's the hilarious thing, is when you've already taken it to arbitration, then the arbitrator's going, well, we'll give you more time to sort it out yourself. It's like, this is why it's in arbitration, because we couldn't sort it out ourselves.
So I had to wait another month for that. And then I was actually kind of surprised. I thought maybe like tempers have cooled a little bit, because when I got finally the message through from the tenancy deposit service who were holding the monies, they were like, oh, the number I saw was minus £50. I went, oh, did cooler heads prevail, and they decided to just charge me like the 30 quid for removing that furniture plus like 20 quid for fuel or something. And I read it, it said negative £50 in the sense that they wanted an additional £50 from me, and they'd gone in and claimed for the maximum amount plus a little bit more as a fuck you.
Oh, so instead of asking for half of it, they want all of it plus more.
Because presumably they were just operating under the assumption that, well, they're just going to, argue it down. Like Americans can probably empathise more of like insurance or something like that, where, oh, your medical insurance bill is like 40 grand. And then you can just argue it down to 10 grand. So that's why they quote you such a high figure, because they know you'll quote it down to what they actually want. And presumably my landlord's operating under the same logic of, well, if we just go in and ask for the maximum amount, well, they're going to argue it down and we're going to get a little bit of it, right?
And we're going to get the half that we originally wanted. It's the classic bartering, isn't it? Of you start way higher than you actually want to sell it for or whatever.
Yeah, and from that point onwards, I had about 10 weeks to collate my own evidence, which I'd gone round the flat and I'd filmed. I'd done the classic thing, the walkthrough, which I can't show because it shows where I live and I don't want to out anyone, but it exists. I went through and did the classic of, hi, this is Karl Smallwood on this day, going through a walkthrough of the flat on the final day of tenancy, blah, 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 blah. I'd taken photos of all the relevant stuff. But what I didn't realise is that there were some things the landlord had noticed that I hadn't, so I didn't have evidence for those. And they included damage to a skirting board. And Lucas, you know this photo, right? Mm-hmm. You know this photo, but I'm going to put it up on screen now, and this is the damage that my landlord saw and charged me nigh on £300 to bring in a professional joiner carpenter for Americans to fix. And Lucas, you remember the photo, right? But I can remind you now. Would you like to see it?
I do remember, yes.
Yeah,
but yeah.
You remember the photo? I can send it through to you now. Do you think this looks like something that, requires a joiner to fix? And do you think it's something that would cost a joiner 300 quid?
Honestly, that looks like something I've done for a £5.
Yeah, and I distinctly recall as well, when I the landlord did a walk around of the property earlier, because if anyone curious, how did that damage occur? A mirror fell off the wall, because my landlord had attached a mirror to a wall onto which there was a elevator. So the elevator constantly vibrated that wall, and the mirror fell off, landed on the skirting board, and snapped it. And when I showed it to my landlord, like a year prior, and said, oh, is this the thing you need to fix? And, oh, we can just like glue that back on and paint over it. It's no big deal. And that's the mistake I made.
Which is exactly what they've done.
Well, no, look, you're getting too ahead of yourself, because the other issue they had was a chip in the enamel of the bath, which was so small, you can literally count the pixels on the photo they submitted. The problem is that I didn't have evidence of the damage from my perspective. We only had the way the landlord had framed it, because I never thought to highlight that because I didn't think it was an issue. But then I realised, well, wait a minute, my landlord said they were selling this property, right? So I popped onto Rightmove and I went, typed in my old address, oh, would you look, it's my flat, available for sale. I wonder if I can book in for a viewing. So I booked in for a viewing. Do you remember? I sent the picture of me wearing sunglasses and a suit, because I'm going secret agent mode.
You basically went in, you know those, like, comical disguise glasses with, like, the nose and the mustache on? You essentially just put them on and walked into the building like nobody will know.
Yeah, and I remember, like, the security guard recognised me before, like, the letting agent came down. I was like, what are you doing back? I went, shh. Do you remember what I used to live in? And he's like, yeah. It's like, my landlord, they're trying to, like, charge me a bunch for my deposit. So I'm going in to see the repairs. He went, okay, say no more. Everyone was in on it. It was great. So I went in, like, secret agent mode with sunglasses on, and I was like, yeah, I'm very interested in purchasing the property. Yes. What can you tell me about the previous tenant? It's like, well, the previous tenant, according to the landlord, was very quiet, didn't, like, kept themselves to themselves. And, yes, okay. I will absolutely not use this information at a later date. And I managed to get the photo of the fix they'd done. And I will now put, here's the damage that the landlord singled out. Here's the supposed professional level fix job a professional joiner did. And Lucas, call me cynical, but that, to me, just looks like someone glued it onto a wall and painted over it.
As I said, I remember seeing this repair that was done and just immediately thought to myself, I could have done that.
And presumably that's exactly what the landlord did, but why not just say, hey, we had to get a professional joiner and it cost us 300 quid, and say, okay, now Karl's got to eat that cost. So I went through every claim they made and discounted it, and I put my own evidence in the video, like, my secret agent spy stuff that I put in, and then I had to wait for a month. And a week ago, I got the final confirmation of what my landlord, if anything, was going to be awarded. And this is where I would love to say my landlord was awarded dick, and I got all of my money back. But unfortunately, not every story has a happy ending, or indeed an ending at all, because after all was said and done, my landlord was awarded £200. And the solace for myself was that the adjudicator had gone through and awarded them the token amount, so at the minimum they could offer for every single claim that they had made. But they were forced to admit that they do have a claim, but they're exaggerating it, so I'm only offering a token amount. So like
exactly, there was damage to a skirting board and there was a chip in the bath, but charging you nigh on £1,000 to sort those problems out is ridiculous.
So what the adjudicator did is the skirting board, £30, the enamel to the bath, £30, the cleaning, £30, the windows, £30, and all said it was done, I owed them about £210. So I got the majority of my deposit back, and more so than I would have got if I agreed to the landlord's terms in the first place, but it cost me about 6 months of my life. And I'm going to preempt a few bits of advice that I know I'm going to get in the audience now, which is going to be either, why didn't you challenge that claim? You can't. The adjudicator's decision is final in these matters. And the second one, which is, why don't you sue them or take them to court? That would be a huge pain in the ass. And this is what frustrates me. Landlords count on that, right? They count on the fact that it's going to be too much of a pain, or you might not even have the necessary resources to fight this. You might need that percentage of your deposit we are offering you. So you might not fight that £500 and get another £300 of it back, because you need that, what's left of it, right now. I was in a fortunate enough position where I didn't need that, so I was able to fight it. And even then, I still didn't get all of it back, because life's not fair sometimes.
Yeah, as you pointed out, you had one time where you all had to eat a £90 fee because one person needed most of that deposit for another deposit in the future. And as you say, that's just what they rely on, and they're just hoping that people need to go from place to place in a rush and just, what, you're offering me half my deposit back, I'll just take it, whatever, I can't be dealing with this argument right now.
Yeah, and I know there's been plenty of people out there who've been following this story on social media, and they probably are annoyed that that's the ending. They were probably hoping, like, well, it's going to be like, you got all the money back, right, and an apology. No, didn't get anything. Not heard from my landlord since, and that is kind of a downer ending. So there is a small silver lining, because I said that my landlord was trying to sell their property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as of today, the time of recording this video, that property is still available for sale. They've yet to sell it. And it's been stood empty for 3 months. So while I've lost several £100s in a couple of months of my time, my landlord has lost all of the months of rent they would have gotten from me, which I've calculated to be at least 3 times what I've lost. And you know what? I consider that a win. So thank you to everyone for bearing with me for this one. I know this has been a long video, but this has been 8 months of my life, and this is the first time I've been able to tell the story start to finish, albeit the truncated version where I've edited out identifiable information. And I know there's going to be someone out there who's upset that it doesn't have, you know, that satisfying, cool ending, but that's life. And that's why, as well, I made it into a video, because I knew when this started, I'm not going to get my money back. I knew there was going to be I was going to eat some kind of cost, which is why when it all started, I just made a mental note, and I think I messaged you, Lucas, didn't I? Of like, this is going to be a how not to do business.
Yep.
So I think like the group chat asked me, like, why are you like documenting all of this online? It's like, because it's going to be a how not to do business. Because I know I'm going to lose some amount of money because my landlord is that petty. They will not give up an inch. So at the very least, I can drag it out as long as possible, get a story out of it, and turn that story into a Fact Fiend video.
And the important thing to remember, everyone, is that while Karl may have lost a few £100s, they've lost potentially thousands in rent.
Yes.
And still continue to this day to have not sold the property and got any money on these coming months.
And they're presumably still paying the mortgage and the service charge, which, as mentioned, only went up by £10. And I did have a bit here, but when I had like £10, I was going to hold up at the end of the video, because I do script these, believe it or not. I was going to hold it up and say, so they did all that for £10. Then I realised I didn't have a tenner. Because who carries cash? And the only tenner I had was in a card for my cousin for their birthday, and I didn't want to open it because I'd have to buy another stamp. But yeah, that's the thing to keep in mind as well. They've cost themselves potentially thousands upon thousands of pounds because they didn't want to eat the cost of a tenner. I don't think anything sums up landlords more, right? Like just the cutting off the nose to spite the face attitude of landlords, of intentionally costing themselves hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, because they just couldn't admit they were wrong or eat the cost of £10.
Or even just ask to put the rent up by a tenner instead of like nearly 200 quid.
Yeah, well, I'll never have to deal with that again, because, as mentioned multiple times throughout this video, I now own my own property. And I consider this place to be the culmination of all of the years I worked on Fact Fiend. All the, like, you know, and all those years I toiled away when I was like laptop Karl. This is the culmination of that. So I'm able to look back on this and smile because, yeah, I did lose a little bit of money, but I've gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, which is a really lame way of looking at it, so screw it. See you all next time.